The Waterfall of Ghosts. There was once a small village in Japan very near a cascade called the Waterfall of Ghosts. No one could say for sure why it was called this. Some people thought they saw the twisting shapes of ghosts in the mists that rose from the rocks onto which the water poured. Some claimed to hear ghostly voices or the voices of gods or demons in the roar. It was considered a holy place, so the villagers built a small shrine at the foot of the falls and left a little wooden money box there for visitors to make offerings. One frosty evening in the last century, the women and girls who worked in the local factory, where they spun hemp into lengths of rope, gathered around the big iron stove after their work was done. As they warmed their hands by the coal fires, they amused themselves by telling ghost stories. By the time a dozen stories had been told, even the bravest began listening with new ears to the whisper of wind at the doors and window frames. They began to grow uneasy at the idea of walking home through the dark. Then one of the younger girls, who was enjoying the little thrills of fear she was getting, said, "Just think of going all alone tonight to the Waterfall of Ghosts." Her suggestion provoked shudders, followed by nervous laughter. "Why," said the girl, unwilling to let the matter rest, "'Til give all the hemp I spun today to any person who goes." "So will I," exclaimed another, caught up in the spirit of the game. "And I," another promised. Soon all but one of the women had offered her day's output of rope as a prize to anyone brave enough to go to the waterfall that night. The only spinner who did not join with the others was a young woman named Okatsu, the wife of the village carpenter. "Listen," she said, "if you will all really agree to hand over the hemp you spun today, I will go to the Waterfall of Ghosts." Her words were met with cries of astonishment. Most thought she was joking. But when she repeated her challenge several times, they realized she was serious. Each of the spinners promised to give up her share of the day's work to Okatsu if she went to the waterfall. "But how will we know if she really goes there?" several women asked. "Why, let her bring back the money box from the shrine," said the old woman the others had nicknamed Grandmother. She added, "That will be proof enough. She can return the money in the morning, after she has shown it to us." "I will bring it, you'll see," boasted Okatsu, who did not believe in ghosts. In her greed, she had also made up her mind to take the money from the offering box before she returned it. Bundling a warm robe around her, she hurried out into the street. The night was frosty but clear. The young woman's wooden clogs made crunching sounds on the ice-crusted road as she hurried down the empty street. All the doors and windows of the houses she passed were shut tight against the piercing cold. But Okatsu only pulled her robe more tightly about her, and thought of the coins she would take from the shrine in a short while, and the hemp she would take from her fellow workers in the morning. Soon she left the village behind and hurried along the road that ran between frozen rice fields that glittered in the starlight. For nearly half an hour, she traveled through the great silence. Then she heard the distant roar of the Waterfall of Ghosts. A little while later she began following a narrow path that wound under high cliffs. Her way grew darker and more dangerous as she neared the bottom, but she had visited the falls before, so she knew the way. The roar of the cascade grew louder and louder. The path ran around a huge boulder and opened onto a stretch of pebbled shore. The sound of the falls was now deafening. She could see the water like a shining ribbon of silk against the black cliffs. In the starlight she could just make out the curved roof of the shrine and the shadowy square of the money box underneath. She rushed forward eagerly and stretched out her hand to take it. But the sound of the waterfall suddenly became a babble of voices crying, "Oh, wicked woman!" For a moment Okatsu stood frozen, gripped with terror. But she was a bold young woman. "It's only the sound of the water," she said to herself. When she looked at the falls, she seemed to see strange, twisted shapes boiling about the base. But she told herself, that's only the mist. She snatched up the money box and ran. Behind her the chorus of ghostly voices cried, "Oh! Oh! Oh! Wicked, wicked woman!" Okatsu did not stop running until she reached the top of the path. There she paused a moment, gasping for breath. Then she ran back toward the village. Around her, snow began to fall lightly on the ice-covered fields, then faster and faster. A wind rose and tried to push her back the way she had come. In its howling she thought she could hear angry voices crying, "Oh Katsu! Oh Katsu!" But she kept on, her robe wrapped snugly around her, and only her eyes uncovered. The snow was drifting so high that even her tall clogs could not keep her feet dry. But she was back in the village now, and she could see the lights of the hemp factory ahead. Before she went any farther, she took shelter in an alleyway between two buildings and opened the money box. She took all but a handful of copper coins and put these in her kimono. Then she walked toward the lighted windows of the factory. The other women had all stayed to see if Okatsu would make good her boast. They cried out in amazement when she entered, panting, with the money box from the shrine. They brought her to the fire, asking breathless questions about what had happened. Okatsu told them in a few sentences about hearing ghostly voices, though she did not tell them that the voices had called her wicked. She said nothing about the coins she had stolen. When the woman nicknamed Grandmother opened the box and saw only a few coppers in the bottom, Okatsu was loudest in crying out how miserly people were to leave such a miserable offering at a shrine. "How brave you are, Okatsu," said the young girl whose challenge had started the whole business. "You have certainly earned the hemp we promised." The others all agreed, and they good-naturedly turned their day's output over to Okatsu. Then they hurried away to their own homes. When she was alone, Okatsu took the stolen coins out of her kimono to count them by the ruddy glow of the fire. But the offering box, on the floor beside her feet, suddenly began rocking from side to side. "Oh! What is this?" cried the startled young woman. As if to answer her, the lid of the box suddenly flew open, and a white mist, like steam, issued from it. Okatsu looked on in horror, as the mist began to take on strange forms and suddenly became a howling cloud of ghosts. Their bodies were drawn out to amazing lengths, their legs dwindled away to nothingness, their necks were long and twisted like snakes, they stretched their long arms out and clutched at Okatsu with their thin, pale fingers. Around and around the frightened woman they spun, like a horrible whirlpool, screeching, "Wicked woman! Wicked woman!" Okatsu thought she might faint. She sank to her knees and begged the ghosts to leave her alone. Then an idea occurred to her. She took the coins she still held in her hands and returned them to the offering box. When all the money had been put back, the ghosts poured themselves like a waterfall down into the box. The lid closed with a snap. Quickly dressing in her warm robes, Okatsu took the box and hurried back to the shrine. There she replaced it, with a promise to give the spirits of that place all the money she would get from selling the hemp she had gained by her disrespectful deed. This she did the very next morning, and she was never troubled by ghosts again. Oiwa is one of the most famous Japanese ghost stories. It is about a woman who is poisoned by her unfaithful husband. Her disfigured ghost returns from the dead to exact revenge. Oiwa was a beautiful young woman who lived in a small town in Japan. Her boyfriend's name was Iman, and although he didn't have much money, Oiwa loved him very much. She was overjoyed when her childhood sweetheart asked her to marry him. After the wedding, they moved in together and the happy couple were soon expecting a baby. Oiwa didn't care that Iman was poor, but, as time went on, he became angry and depressed about his lack of prospects. Iman soon grew to hate his happy young wife and started an affair with a rich young woman named He romanced her for months and eventually, she fell in love with him, despite his poverty and the fact that he was already married. One day, father came to see Iman. He told Iman what a shame it was that he was already married, because his daughter loved him very much. The father went on to tell him all the ways that he could ensure his future son-in-law's wealth and success. Iman listened intently. Iman spent a great deal of time thinking about what father had told him. An evil plot began to form in his mind. He decided that the only way he could marry was to somehow get rid of Oiwa and her unborn child. He thought that the easiest way to do this was to secretly poison Oiwa and make it look like she had died of natural causes. Poor Oiwa was totally ignorant of her husband's murderous plans. Blissfully unaware of the fate that was about to befall her, she continued to happily prepare for the birth of their baby. One evening, when Oiwa and Iman were sitting down to eat dinner, she noticed her husband was strangely quiet and nervous. She encouraged him to eat his dinner, but he would not touch his food. He yelled at Oiwa and told her to stop fretting and eat her own meal. She needed to be strong for the baby, he said. Oiwa finally gave up trying to tempt Iman's appetite and started to eat her dinner. It wasn't long before she felt very sick. Iman watched her coldly as the poison did its work, not offering her any help or comfort. But Oiwa did not die right away. Her beautiful face became disfigured from the poison first. Then she slipped into unconsciousness. Iman was too much of a coward to finish the job he started, so he put Oiwa's lifeless body in bed. Eventually, Oiwa woke from her coma, remembering nothing of the poisoning. She had lost her baby, and her face was ugly and terrible, but Oiwa lived. Iman was desperate. He played the part of the concerned husband, but he was looking for any way possible to rid himself of his wife. One evening he took Oiwa for a long walk. They made their way to a cliff, and Iman looked around to see if anyone was nearby. No one was in sight. Iman pushed Oiwa off the ledge. Her broken body was recovered and Iman gave her the best funeral he could afford, spending all of his money in a great show of marital devotion. Of course, Iman knew his money troubles were only temporary now that Oiwa was gone. Thinking his worries were over, Iman planned his wedding to The night before the marriage was to take place, Iman noticed his bedside lamp was dimming. He looked at it curiously, as it seemed to be changing. The disfigured face of Oiwa suddenly replaced the lamp, growing larger and larger in the room. "Betrayal," it hissed. Iman grabbed a stick and swung at the face, but Oiwa disappeared and the lamp smashed and fell to the floor. Iman thought he heard the faint laughter of a woman from outside. Shaken, Iman convinced himself that the vision was simply the result of drinking too much alcohol earlier in the evening, and went to bed. The next day, Iman had forgotten all about the specter from the night before. He and were wed. When he lifted her veil, however, her beautiful young face was replaced with Oiwa's horrible visage. "Betrayal," she hissed. The horrified Iman drew his sword and swung it at the ghostly apparition, cutting Oiwa's head off. The severed head rolled down the aisle of the church, but when it came to a stop, it had Om's face and not Oiwa's. He heard the faint sound of laughter again. Iman ran to his tiny house, looking for a place to hide. There was a pounding at the door, and Om's grandfather demanded that he open it. When Iman did so, Oiwa was standing there. "Betrayal," she hissed. Once again, Iman tried to decapitate her, but when his sword finished its work, it was Om's grandfather that lay dead. Iman ran for the cliffs, Oiwa's laughter following him. He stopped at the edge and looked down, perhaps changing his mind. It didn't matter. Passers-by reported seeing a woman push Iman off the cliff before she jumped after him, laughing all the way down. Maniacal laughter is a scary story about evil demonic voices. What will happen if you listen to strange voices in your head? Never listen to them. Usually for dinner, I either went out and bought it at a fast food restaurant, or go to the diner with Ashley. She lived with a full family who spoiled her and bought her everything she liked, but we still were best friends. Sometimes I went over to her house, and once she went over to mine when my mom went out to Vegas for a week. She slept over. After a while, I left my room. My mom was passed out cold on the couch, an empty bottle in her lap. I snuck out the front door and made sure I had enough money for the diner. I had $10 from my weekend job, which is scooping ice cream at Baskin-Robbins. It was creepy walking in the city streets at night, but I knew soon I would be having a delicious meal with my best friend. I turned to walk through the alley, my shortcut, when suddenly there was no light at all. Simply darkness. I couldn't see anything at all. I looked up at the sky, and the moon had disappeared. I opened my phone to cast a small trail of light, but it wasn't much use. I stumbled, confused, through the darkened alleyway, hoping somehow there would be light again. Suddenly I heard something. Nothing more than a simple breeze, quiet and steady. I couldn't make out what it was. I stopped walking and listened again. Kill her. What? I called out, my voice echoing against the walls. Kill her. She deserves to die. Who's there? My heart pounding against my chest. If anyone attacked, I wouldn't know where to turn or what to do. Fear gripped my stomach and I turned to run, but something held me back. You must kill her. It is the only way. Stop it, I screamed. My voice echoed yet again. I broke out in a run, not sure where I was going. Kill your mother before she kills you. I stopped dead. My skin turned ice cold, and I could feel my face turn the color of the snow that was caked in my boots. I took a deep breath and gathered the courage to speak despite my shaking voice. Who said that? The shadow people. Abigail, we are your friends. We know what is best for you. You must kill her. Tonight. While she is drunk. Take a knife to her heart and escape. Come to us. We shall guide you to happiness. We know what you want, Abigail. You want a family. You want friends. You want a television, a nice computer, a good cell phone. You want a pretty house, you want to be treated right. You want happiness. We can give that to you. I squeezed my eyes shut and opened them again. The light had returned. I don't understand, I muttered, my voice trailing off. How did these mysterious people know so much about me? The most unsettling part was that they were telling me to kill my own mother. I began walking to the other side of the alley. A breeze blasted by, and I could make out the words, simple and clear, kill her. Suddenly I was enraged. My mother was an evil being. She was horrible. She deprived me of everything a teenage girl needed. I kicked the rundown brick wall and screamed. Then I formed a plan in my head. I pulled out my phone and composed a text to Ashley. I have other plans. Will not be able to meet you. Maybe tomorrow. I turned on my heel and dashed home, my mind racing with thoughts. My fingers tingled in anticipation, my heart raced. The wind in my hair was invigorating. Everything seemed to be encouraging me to do what I was about to do. I arrived home in just 5 minutes and burst through the door. There was silence. I walked into the scrappy living room, which consisted of a horrible couch that my mom found outside a house one day with a sign that read for free. I hurried to the kitchen, grabbed a sharp knife, and plunged it into my drunk mother's chest, smiling maniacally. Not a sound came from her. She was dead. I cheered with joy. I jumped up. My worries were gone. The shadow people would give me all my hopes and dreams. I would be happy again. I ran back to the alleyway, little shrieks of glee escaping from my throat. I entered and waited for the voices. Nothing came. Shadow people. I did as you asked. I killed her. I killed my mom. Now give me what you promised. I heard something. I kept still. At first it was quiet. But it grew louder and louder. Laughing. Evil, mean, cold laughter. Laughing at me. Laughing at my foolishness. I dropped to my knees. I committed a heinous crime for these shadow people. People who I couldn't even see. I should have known. Foolish child. You should have known not to trust us shadow people. More laughing. I let out a scream. When I woke up, I was sitting in a white room. I looked down, and I was clothed in soft white cotton. I wore a straitjacket, and I was alone. Hello? Nothing. I screamed at the top of my lungs. I struggled to escape from the jacket, but I could not. Then it came again. darkness, and the laughter. The sickening maniacal laughter. The Hungry Hut is a scary story about a young man who is lost in the woods and comes across an old couple who live in a shack. One day, I took my fishing rod and went out into the woods. I must have walked for miles, until I came to a part of the river that looked like a good spot for fishing. However, the fish just weren't biting and, try as I might, I couldn't catch a thing. It was evening and the light was fading, so I decided to go home. However, in the twilight, I got disoriented and became lost in the woods. I wandered around in circles for almost an hour. The light was fading and night was falling fast. Just as I was about to give up hope, I came across a small cabin, half hidden in the bushes. It was old and dilapidated, but I could see a light in the window. When I got closer, I saw that there was a man and a woman outside. The woman was dressed in a shawl and the man was wearing pants, but no shirt. As I approached, they both froze and stared at me suspiciously. "Who are you and what do you want?" the man asked gruffly. "I'm lost," I said. "I came out here to sow some fishing, but somehow, I got disoriented and now I can't find my way home." "Do you have a phone?" "Phone," the man chuckled. "We ain't got no phone out here. But you're welcome to stay the night with us and in the morning, I'll draw you a map so you can get home." I thanked him and he brought me into the house. We sat down at the table and his wife filled a bowl of soup and handed it to me. It was little more than boiled water with a few vegetables thrown in, but I ate it gratefully. "How did you manage to get lost?" she asked. "We've lived out here in the wilderness for years and years and we never get lost." "It's hard to get lost when you already live in the middle of nowhere," I replied. After dinner, they told me I looked tired and said it was time to go to bed. They brought me to a room and since there was no bed, I had to lay on the floor. I felt drowsy and could barely keep my eyes open. Just as I was about to drift off to sleep, I heard hushed voices outside my door. The man and woman were whispering to each other. "Quiet, you'll scare him away," the woman whispered. "We haven't had any meat for a month." "We'll have a feast tonight," the man whispered. "Hand me the damn axe." As soon as I heard those words, my heart sank into my stomach and my hair stood on end. I quietly got up and opened the window. I climbed out, quick as a flash, and ran like mad. I ran faster than I had ever run before. I ran through the darkness, not knowing which direction I was going. It was pitch black and the branches of the trees whipped against my face. I ran and ran until it started to get light and eventually, I came to a road. I waited there for almost 2 hours, until a car came along and then I stuck out my thumb. Luckily, the car stopped for me and the driver gave me a ride back to my village. As soon as I got home, I told my story to everyone who would listen. Some of the people in the village wanted to go to the police, but the older people just shook their heads and said it would do no good. An old man, who had lived in the village all his life, told me something that shocked me to my very core. He said that, many years ago, when he was just a child, a lot of people disappeared. They went into the forest and never came back. Many of them were children and nobody knew what happened to them. One day, the men in the village organized a search party and they went into the woods to see if they could find any trace of the missing people. They searched for days, but they found nothing. Just as it seemed all their efforts would be in vain, they came across a small hut, hidden in the bushes. There was a man and a woman living inside and they were acting suspiciously. There was also a terrible, overpowering stench coming from the hut. The villagers found a trapdoor in the floor of the hut. There was a padlock on it. The man and woman said it led down into a cellar, but they refused to open it. Eventually, the villagers broke off the lock and opened the trapdoor. When they peered down into the darkness, their eyes were greeted by a terrible sight. There were piles of human bodies, stacked up like butchered meat, and among them lay a little boy. His hands were bound and his mouth was gagged, and he was crying. The disgusted villagers rescued the young boy. Then, they took the man and woman over to a tall tree and hung them on the spot.